The views and opinions expressed by the Loft Party Podcast panel participants and guests do not necessarily reflect those of the Good Times with Good People company, the host, or its sponsors.
Just not getting it.
Welcome everybody out there in podcast land. The Good Times with Good People company proudly presents the Loft Party Podcast, where it is always about good times, good people, and good talk. Now that you've received your invitation, the best way to let us know that you're in attendance is to download the party or become official by joining us on Facebook, subscribing on YouTube, iTunes Podcasts, or Google Play Podcasts. Good. Thanks for joining us. Grab a cocktail, light a cigar, or whatever you like to smoke. Share us with your friends, and make yourself at home. I'm your host and moderator, Rio, and let's introduce today's panel. All right, everybody out there in podcast land, thank you for tuning in to the Loft Party Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Rio, and let me introduce today's panel. Today, we've got our returning champion, Chris O'Connor. He is the owner of Liquid 9 Entertainment, as well as having interest in Office Works and Regal Whiskey. And of course, we have Brian Massey, our own personal brain mass, here to crunch the numbers for us. And the anonymous female, because she doesn't want you to know her name. And today on episode 60 of the Loft Party Podcast, what is this Memorial Day? So I got to thinking, if an alien were to come to Earth and some of our holidays, like how will we even explain them? Because some of them are so specific or so strange, especially ones that are only specific to America. So I was wrestling with the what is Memorial Day question, and I thought, since we're actually recording this podcast on Memorial Day, that would be a good question to pose to the group. But before we do, let's get to a couple of things that we like to do. One of which is, so, what are we drinking? And Ben, our bartender, he couldn't stay, but before he left, he made some delicious Regal Whiskey cocktails. So, he says it started with 2 pints of Regal Whiskey. 2 parts, because 2 pints, gee whiz, we would be super blasted. 2 parts Regal Whiskey, 1 part Athel Bros, 1 part Creme de Violet, and a half part of fresh squeezed lemon juice. And you pour that over a lemon wheel float, and you have today's cocktail. We were trying to give it a name, but we couldn't come up with a good name. But I thought just the description of that cocktail would make you guys out there in podcast land at least want to see what it is that we were drinking. And today we're not in our normal location. We're actually at Office Works. So we are not smoking today. So I'm not going to even pretend like we're smoking, because we're actually in one of the very nice conference rooms at Office Works, and we're not going to defile it with our evil, wicked cigar smoke. But before we go any further, of course, I want to do the RIPs that we do every week. First, I want to say RIP to James Bond himself, Roger Moore, passed away at 89. Roger Moore is just one of those names that, unless, of course, you're talking about Bond movies, you just don't hear that name come up. So I was surprised when I saw that one come up. And then two, the bigger of the RIPs, I want to say, I did a little research because the brain mass is not the only one who can do research on numbers. So I did a little research, and we have had 1.2 million men and women that have given their lives in all of the wars and conflicts that America has fought over the years of America. And I thought on this Memorial Day when we are supposed to be giving tribute to the fallen that have served us in our military. The biggest RIP goes to those 1.2 million men and women and everything that they've given for us for our freedoms. And with that, we're going to take a brief break, and we'll be right back. Hey, you can search for the Loft Party Podcast on iTunes Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts, and on our Good Times with Good People YouTube channel. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook, tweet us on Twitter, and if you like the content we provide, donate to us on Patreon. www.patreon.com/Loft Party Podcast. You can find all of our links below. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. All right, so we're back, and we are about to play a party game. And of course, the party game is... Okay, so let me explain. The anonymous female and I were having a conversation, and she found something that was talking about people writing these 6-word life stories. Some of them were funny, some of them were poignant, but they were only 6 words that could sum up your life to this point. And I thought that would be kind of, fun and poignant, but kind of a cool game to play, especially on this Memorial Day episode of the Loft Party Podcast. And I'm going to start with... I was going to start with Brian Massey, so he was giving me the face like, please don't do this to me. Don't do me like this. So I'm going to start with the anonymous female. And what would your 6-word life story be?
Mine's optimist by choice, not by chance.
That's really good. It's almost like you've rehearsed that.
That is a good one.
I may have.
You've thought about that. What about you, Chris? What do you think?
I'm generally confused, but bullshit well.
That is awesome.
There you go.
I like that.
That is really good. That is really good.
All right, here we go.
All right.
I have mistakes past, present focus, and eyes forward. Have to take out and.
Wow.
I like that. I like that a lot.
They don't have to have and in there.
I like that. Yeah, well, I say, and it's funny, when we were originally talking about this, I was really thinking kind of deep and heavy, and then it hit me that I'd say my 6 words to you every week. To good times with good people. So, with all that said, let's move on to party politics.
Oh, all right.
Wait, what? No. What was it?
No, there were a couple of really good ones on the... If you want to see some of them, you can go to sayitin6.com. It's 6wordmemoirs.com.
Okay. And what were some of the ones that you were...
They have a favorited section.
Cool.
It's just not letting go, just adjusting grip.
I like that.
Dotted his lies, crossed his pleas. Bags under my eyes are Prada.
Very nice. Very nice.
Maybe writing is lying with integrity.
I was happy.
That one is deep.
I was like, man.
Picking a path, Chinese finger trap.
So what was the name of the site again?
6wordmemoirs.com.
Okay. So out there in podcast land, what is your 6-word memoir? If you care to, leave it in the comments below. I would love to know what you sum your life up in 6 words as. And with that, now we are moving on to party politics. But before we do, we'll be right back.
Hey out there in podcast land, we would not be doing our duty if we didn't acknowledge the sponsors of the Loft Party Podcast, the Majestic Restaurant and Jazz Club, and the Majestic's Pendergast Club. The Majestic carries on Kansas City's tradition of great food and jazz. Let them show you why they are the classic Kansas City steakhouse experience. 931 Broadway, just 3 blocks from the Kansas City Convention Center. J. Rieger and Company, a Kansas City distillery. Whether whiskey, gin, or vodka, neat or on the rocks, J. Rieger, Kansas City, sipping good since 1887. C&P Construction, Kansas City's premier wood framers. 50 years of quality framing and craftsmanship. Just email david.cnpservice@gmail.com and start building something new today. And our friend and frequent guest, Lane Boland. Thank you all for all that you do. Time to rejoin the conversation.
Okay, and so we are back, and so we're talking about Memorial Day, and here's the question that brought us to the table. If an alien came down to Earth today, how would you describe Memorial Day to them? And Brainmass, during our break, actually asked a very interesting question. So I think I'm actually going to start with him on this one because not only how will we describe Memorial Day to them, but from what they observe of us, how close is our description to what they would see?
Right. I think it'd be interesting to say without someone else explaining it to him first. Like, you tell me what you see. And, I was out at the cemetery yesterday. And so just to kind of start with that, I think that they're going to see a lot of flags. Mm. You're going to see a lot of people out spending time at these stone fields or fields with stones in them. They're going to see a lot of people traveling to get to those places and traveling very far in some cases. But on the other side, depending on where they land, if they land anywhere near a lake, they're going to say it's a big party. Because liquor stores are also flooded with people getting cases of beer, filling up their coolers, getting the boats out for the first time in the year.
Right.
A 3-day weekend, maybe 3 days in a row where people aren't working. I think that's what they would observe. I think that I definitely think the fields would be overshadowed by the lakes. From an observation perspective. Absolutely.
That's actually a great way to phrase it. The fields will be overshadowed by the lakes. So I like that. Excuse me. So if that's what they'd see, what would you tell them it actually is?
Me?
Yeah, well, we'll start with you and work our way around the table.
I don't know. It's interesting. I'll get to that thought later. So my initial thought is, if I was to explain to someone, it's a time to remember those anyone around you that has made an impact in your life for the best or for better, and send respect. It's a time to pause for a moment and really think about how those around that are no longer with you have changed your life, and sending respect. That's what I would say.
Come from a legal family. Mm-hmm. I'm interested in your definition of the day, because I know the anonymous female is probably different in that she comes from a family who's had a lot of people serve in the military. So, but coming from a family And I don't know if you've had, a lot of relatives serve or not, but I do know that we had a lot of families in law. So, what would your definition kind of look like to an alien trying to figure this thing out?
To an alien, it'd be weird. It'd be interesting to know because I've never yet met an alien, but it would be fun too. I don't know if they understand.
Ask our president, you may have.
Yeah, that's probably true too. If there's a concept of family, if there's a concept of loss, if there's a concept of all those things, I mean, I think it's probably true that there generally is. I mean, most things have a shelf life and then go away. So I would assume that they'd be familiar with the concept of loss, and I think it is so uniquely ingrained in all of us that when you lose somebody, you just go through a whole series of emotions, but then you can get to the point, like you were saying, where you remember, take a little time out on one day and remember the best parts of people that maybe you miss or maybe made a large impact, even people you don't know. Because I know it's traditionally thought of as a large service, military service day and that kind of thing. But, and yeah, I've had service members in our family and friends and that kind of stuff. But for me, it's always been more of a day just to remember people that have come before me, family members, or even people I didn't know, and take just a little time out to just remember I'm honored and honor that memory, and go from there. It's funny, like it started, and at least in America, like after the Civil War, was like when it really started taking off and becoming a big holiday, and it was mainly to honor just dead veterans, from the Civil War and that kind of stuff. But I think that limits it a lot because there's so many people who make enormous impacts that may have never served in any service, but have done tremendous things. And now I think it's less of in my mind, it's less of a national holiday and more of a very individual holiday, where it has become so personal to so many people, and it gives you a chance as an individual to thank those people or remember them in a way that you want to remember them.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. I think I've always treated the holiday as I've kind of always treated it as a military memorial holiday. But as I've gotten older, I've definitely started to reflect on friends and family and things that have passed on more than imposing kind of a strictly a military kind of thought on it. So it's interesting that both of you had that overall thought.
I think we're both though, and I would count you as well in this. It's interesting being from, and again I'm 45. We haven't had major wars, in a time that I can remember a lot of those people that would have given their lives for that. I mean, for all we want to talk about Iraq and Afghanistan, we actually haven't lost a vast number of people. You have the stat that 1.2 million people died. Well, 600,000.
But that's over the course.
600,000 died in the Civil War.
Exactly.
That was Americans fighting Americans. If you look at foreign wars, we really haven't lost nearly as many people as other countries have. And particularly, I would say from Vietnam on, it's hard to find tons of families that have been directly affected. I mean, you may know somebody who knew somebody, or you may have had a friend. Certainly there are people who lost actual legitimate relatives, but we haven't had that many deaths through conflict in the last, what would that be, almost 55 years. So that's where it becomes a little bit tougher for somebody like me to go, okay, this is a military holiday versus just a way to remember people who made an impact on me. Right. And I don't think you remove the military element of it. You're certainly grateful for their service and everything else. And I do enjoy that aspect of it. And certainly they should be celebrated and all those other kinds of things. But it's hard to personally relate on a military level to that.
Right. So, what are you thinking, anonymous female?
I guess I do look at it a little differently because I still have active military members of my family, and they are very much about don't, remember it's for fallen, military members. It's not for any other reason.
Right.
But I get what you guys are saying too. I mean, when you don't have that in your family and you don't hear it all the time, it is, my aunts and uncles go visit my grandparents' grave, and my grandfather was in the Navy, but he didn't die in service.
Right.
The social aspect of it, though, it is, if there's one thing in America that kind of has always been, there's always celebration of death. It's not, I don't mean it like that. You celebrate instead of
Celebrate their
or
life.
in addition to mourning.
Right. Yeah.
But that's where a lot of that comes from. I think you can look at it the same way you do Christmas if you're a Christian, or whatever other holiday that there is an underlying purpose to it that younger generations may have forgotten, but that's just the social aspect of people.
Right.
You come together and you celebrate. So, I don't know. I think there's if you're talking to an alien, you really have to talk about the social and the traditional reasons for
Right, for
Memorial
having
Day,
the day.
or any holiday, I guess.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting is that we still have a separate Veterans Day.
Yeah,
Well,
and I
Veterans
guess
Day is to celebrate people that are alive. Memorial Day is to celebrate people that died in service.
I will say it makes me uncomfortable when those when people get those screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's weird.
I actually did one year, and one of my active military family members was like
Corrected.
very harshly.
Yeah, I always find that interesting. There's been a lot of posts, like you see it on social media a lot. I want to thank all the veterans that are out there. It's like, this is Memorial Day. This is not what that's really for. Like I get that it's because that's the thing is like they mean for it to be good. Like they mean to do it with a good heart. Sometimes people post that stuff and just want attention. But
yeah.
Well, and I think that, like I said, if you don't have that military presence all the time, people aren't hearing it on TV what Memorial Day is for. They hear sail, barbecue.
But I think that's part of the evolution of why it's turned into kind of what we were talking about, where it's like, I liked what you said, where it's more of an individual holiday. I think that, I think you hit the nail on the head. I feel very much that way. And that, I kind of lost my train of thought. But that it's it's more, which is why it's kind of to me in my head, so very different than a veterans. And definitely veterans obviously is strictly military. And I don't know that I've ever thought of Memorial Day as being strictly military ever. But I've always understood it had a very strong military aspect within it. Like it's, hey, remembering all these people are in our own lives. But then also, the other half is definitely remember those that have fought and have fallen to...
Chris was right. It started with the Civil War, and, it hasn't changed. They didn't change it to be remembering everybody. It still is a military holiday that we observe.
Yeah.
It's just how we've chosen to adapt to it.
Yeah. And
Which
I
there's
definitely
nothing
see-
wrong
yeah.
with it. It just... I'm sure my family would not like that, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I've never felt that it was doing dishonor to honor other people that weren't in the military.
Yeah. Well, when you step back and think about the individuals paying tribute to those around it, that's all in good. Like, that's all a good purpose for that, regardless whether it's for people in the military or anyone else that was in their lives. So
Yeah, I definitely And it's kind of interesting because I really do think of it as a military holiday kind of first, but once there's a certain point in the day when my thoughts and energies go from, just giving kind of thanks to all of the soldiers who've come before us and fallen in battle to just people that I've known over the years that have passed away and what they've meant to me and to my life and what I've learned and gleaned from them. And so that's always to me. It's always. I've always known what type of holiday it is, but I've always kind of carried it. I don't know at what point in the day it flips for me, but I always start in the morning kind of feeling like, military. But it starts some point in the day, I just get sentimental about just the people that I've known.
Well, interesting. When you were talking about this topic, when you said this was going to be the topic, I was reading that Clinton, I can't remember what act or whatever he passed, but he made 3 p.m. on Memorial Day the actual time of day that you stop and remember.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and which is actually funny because
I
I was thinking
what they call
it's somewhere between. I was thinking in my mind, it's always somewhere between 1:30 and 3:30 that my mind kind of flips. So I was like, maybe it's just at 3. That mentally I flip. And
it is funny, and by no means do I have any disrespect for veterans. I would never say that. But I think everybody contributes in their own way. I have a hard time with it being just a military holiday. I really do. And there's so many ways just to celebrate. What about all the other people who have passed on? I just think the combination of all that's nice. I think if they were military, great. If they weren't military, great. Mm-hmm. There's other days that celebrate the military too. It's a weird thing for me, and especially just probably because I don't come from a military family, so it's less important to me. I view it more as nice job, good work, you had a good career, that kind of stuff. And yes, you may have, died in battle or those kinds of things, but somebody else may have died in a civil rights march, or maybe somebody else just died unfortunately in a family, but they were important to you. I just always have such a hard time with elevating that to be the biggest thing when it isn't always the biggest thing to me. And again, there is Veterans Day, and I think the fact that that's only for living veterans is kind of strange, but okay. Then we used to have Armistice Day. But then why don't we make a big deal about All Souls Day, which the Mexicans and Dia de Muertos is humongous in Mexico.
Massive.
And that's a celebration of everybody. But we never have a day that, in theory, celebrates everybody.
Right.
And so I think Memorial Day has slowly evolved to become that. And that's not a change that bothers me.
Yeah,
I think though that there's what you're saying about All Souls Day though, that's a Christian holiday. Not everybody sees that as...
Well, in America it is, but I think certainly you would say it's a national holiday in Mexico.
But it's still tied to their religion.
Well, it's a large Catholic country, and so...
There's not a lot of super practicing Mexicans that I know when I'm down there.
I'm not saying that they're all super practicing.
There's a point in time where somehow religion and history becomes mixed together, and it's just a culture, and you're not really thinking of it as a religious holiday.
And I think the reason it's not that way in America is because we are a melting pot, and there are different religions and cultures, and so that's why everything we do has some type of controversy around it, because you see it one way, somebody else sees it another, and your view is totally legitimate. I totally get where you're coming from with that.
And I think a lot of people... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm done.
I was saying, I think a lot of people get this in their mindset, that, there's only so much pie, and if we don't have 100% of it or whatever, then it's like, the pie is a limited size. There's not a percentage that you have to have for you. It's literally, it's infinite.
I think it's funny. I think you touched on something.
Leave it to the statistics person to
put it in mathematical stack terms.
I really thought the 6 words was going to be something along the lines of stats something or other.
It's interesting when you said at a certain point religion and everything kind of fades into culture. And it just, this question just popped in my head. Is that where we are now as a country? We're struggling with the fact that all of the old ways have faded into culture, but so many of the people who want the old ways are still here. And they aren't letting go because the culture has defined itself, and they just don't like the way the culture defined itself.
And it evolves.
Yeah, and it evolves. Yeah, I mean, American culture, if nothing else, evolves kind of rapidly. Which actually kind of brings me to the next topic on the list. What I didn't put in the RIPs because it was more of a topic I wanted to discuss, and that the bombing at the concert in Manchester. I think about how kind of rigid the kind of English culture has been for so long, and now, and French culture for that matter too, in a lot of ways. But now we're starting to see this record number of terrorist actions and bombings and shootings and people driving cars through crowds, and I'm wondering, is that what's happening everywhere? Like, the culture has shifted kind of globally, and there are just people who don't like the change, and they're willing to go completely radical to fight against the shift I think every country's culture is unique to itself, but there are some things that have just kind of swept globally, and they just don't like it. And because we were having a conversation about social media and how the anonymous female's niece, who probably would have been at this Manchester concert because she's in that age bracket, because it was Ariana Grande, was was saying that she doesn't like to talk on the phone. And I thought to myself, and then I said out loud, strange teenage girl. And the anonymous female reminded me, they don't talk on the phone anymore. They text everything. And it hit me how much the culture has shifted.
Well, it's because technology has changed. When we were growing up, there wasn't texting. It was talking on the phone.
Yeah.
So you memorized people's phone numbers, and they don't even do that anymore.
Yeah.
You don't have to memorize phone numbers because you have it in your phone and it's backed up on your email, and it's just as technology advances, culture changes.
Which kind of brings me back to not only the Manchester bombing, but actually the overall question. Like, what is this Memorial Day? I I remember looking at the coverage of the Manchester bombing and kind of being horrified that that this was a room full of kids. I mean they were going to see Ariana Grande. There was a room full of teenage girls, and their parents. And so I remember being really horrified. And then I remember the next day them saying how the memorial was starting to grow outside with the flowers and I just remember thinking that's a phenomenon that I remember maybe not starting but really exploding in our adult life, with Princess Diana dying and like just that massive outpouring of people going and putting flowers outside of the palace and at the site that she had her accident and but it all makes me wonder about the culture shift and how are we reacting to it.
I looked up something interesting because I knew I had read it before, and so I wanted to mention it because it's the whole culture shift thing, and it's tied with religion specifically. So this is an article from the Washington Post back in 2015. It says Christianity is on the decline in America, not just among younger generations or in certain religions of the country, but across race, gender, education, and geographic barriers. So basically everyone. It's dropped nearly, Christians dropped by nearly 8% in the last 7 years. And if you go on to read, those that are not affiliated with religion has jumped from 16% to about 23%. So.
But what exactly does that mean? Like, it doesn't mean that you don't have certain values. I think that younger generations aren't tied to the tradition of what you think of as Christianity.
I really
what I mean?
I really like you saying it because I think the problem is a lot of people don't see it that way. I think a lot of people say, "Oh, if someone's not tied to a religion, they're a bad person."
Right.
And that is not the case. Just like what you said, that doesn't mean there are no values there. And I think what happens a lot of times is that you see these extremists on the very, very far edge and say,
well, and that's the
we
point.
got to save the world by doing whatever it is that they're planning to do, and that's the route they're going, and it's because they believe this is such a horrible thing. These values are gone.
Well, I also think you have to keep in mind that the culture certainly has changed, not just because of technology, but just because of the fact that we had the two most devastating wars in all of history that happened in the last 100 years, like literally 100 years now. And if you look at the makeup of the countries, keep in mind at one point Britain ruled 3/4 of the world's landmass. They're an extraordinarily multicultural society, probably even more so, as much as if not more so than America. France's population has changed. 13% of Paris is now Islamic, and they basically live in the Saint-Denis region, and are still in poverty. It's bad. I think you react to a lot of those things. So when something comes around, again, we're talking an exceptionally number of small percentages of people who are creating these horrific acts, but we're forgetting acts that have happened all throughout history.
Yeah.
So we're remembering the ones that have happened recently, but we're forgetting a ton. I mean, there wasn't a lot of texting going on back when Timothy McVeigh blew up the Oklahoma Oklahoma building. And that was, again, that's some Yahoo in western Kansas blowing up a huge federal building. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to do it. And it's happening everywhere. Yeah. There have been school shootings all over the world. It's not just America. It's not just France. It's not just England. It happens all over. So that's like, I don't know how much things are changing culturally, but I would say, as a great example to your point, at one point, over 90% of French people would say they were Catholic, and there were 2% that were practicing Catholics that went to church on a weekly basis. That's what I mean when I say that at some point history and culture just meld together.
Gotcha.
You know, I would say most British would identify themselves as Anglicans, you know, because it literally is the national religion. But I don't know how many people practice there. I have no idea.
Right.
You know, whenever people ask me, I go, yeah, I'm Catholic. I haven't been to church in years. I'd blow up if I went in there. It would catch on fire. Yes.
Holy water start boiling.
There's a point where it just becomes part of your family tradition or your family history, you know, and you go with it. But I think morals exist outside of those regions, and it's when you start to get into an ideological state that causes a problem. So it'll be interesting. And I think the handful, and it is truly a handful of real ideologues that exist in this world that are willing to do something like that. Think about that. You have to know, I believe in this cause so much that I will blow myself up, and I'm willing. Also so sociopathic that I'm willing to take a whole bunch of other people out with me because I think I'm doing the right thing.
Right.
So
Because I actually believe.
there's not that many people in the world who are willing to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I really do not believe so. It just makes for spectacular news.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I don't think that the percentages of people who are willing to go that far are large at all. But I think the problem is, and nowhere near only in America, we have been peddled the fear of it to the point that, you know, you start to see everybody that comes from that background or looks that way or is that color a certain way, when really, you know, that's probably, you know, half of 1% that would actually do you any harm, you know, or even think about doing you any harm for that matter.
But that's a bigger thing too. It's learned, taught. It's taught behavior.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't know. And you never know. You never know if somebody's just crazy. You never know what the deal is.
Yeah, but I think that
I think people commit crimes for all kinds of reasons. Mm-hmm. I still don't know the point of blowing up the building in Oklahoma was. You blow up a building in Oklahoma, big deal. I mean, I don't know. I still don't know what you were fighting for. I didn't like Oklahoma, so it didn't really resonate with me. So,
You like Oklahoma.
The ones that make me nervous are the ones who have a bizarre ideological bent that they're really insistent upon. And things that don't scare me are these enormous acts of terrorism. Like, I remember so many people freaking out on 9/11 going, oh my God, in Kansas City, I gotta go get my kids and, you know, go home and do all this kind of stuff. I'm like, well, no, they just blew up the World Trade Center. They didn't blow up the hen house down the street. That would freak me out.
Yeah, it would freak me out.
I mean, if I was a
It was
terrorist, I would say...
when was it? What year was it that they had the threat at the federal building down here?
That
Because
was,
it's been
that
since
was in the 90s.
Yeah, it's been since I've worked at DST that they.
Timothy McVeigh couldn't decide whether to blow up the federal building in Kansas City or go to Oklahoma and blow up that one.
Yeah.
And they thought the security was weaker in Oklahoma, so they went there. So, you know, that is something that I think is random, arbitrary. That makes me slightly more nervous because that's a yahoo who's just crazy.
Right.
But, you know, it's not generally that hard to spot religious people who are trying to make a giant splash. I mean, this guy was on their radar forever.
Yeah.
They already knew him. They had him on a watch list. They just didn't do anything to apprehend him before you could be a nut.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't know. It's interesting. Mm-hmm. But there's always been nuts and there always will be, and so what do you do?
I just wonder, like, in that situation, if you take religion entirely out of it, because that tends to be like how they see it for some reason. Whoever's the extremist, if they would find a different reason to go do this terrorist act or any kind of one. Like they didn't. That just happened to be the catalyst they used, or the reasoning that they used. It could have been anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you
Yeah.
have that mentality, you have that
Well,
mentality.
and there's something inside of you already that lets you be susceptible to that lets you believe that, you know, and to take it further than a quote-unquote normal person would.
Right.
You know, most people think about there were children in that building, or, you know, like, what is your real purpose of doing that? You know? Why would you go and bomb a concert that had more children in it than adults.
Well, I don't care if it was all adults, and I don't care if it's all kids. Like, that has never been an argument that really sways me that much. I just feel like you just, and I get it. Maybe it's in our argument that kids haven't had a chance to live a life. Well, dude, I'm not.
I don't mean it that way. But I think that there's, and maybe that's just me, but I think there's something even more horrific about taking a child's life. I mean, they have no idea why you're doing it. None.
Sure.
So it just, to me...
I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say about that one. I just think it's idiotic.
Yes. It's
you
just...
could go to a senior citizen home and do it. It would still have the same...
It just, I just remember the next day on Good Morning America, they were interviewing two girls that were there, and I just remember them trying to get through talking about it, and you could see, that terror wash over them, and you can hear it in their voice, and you can then the tears, and I just remember thinking, they just and I don't know why, because I don't even think it was the fact that it was kids.
No, it
per
was
se.
a lot of people in one place.
Well, I think it was the fact that it was a concert that bothered me.
Just a random event?
Yeah, it was just a random event. Like you go into a concert thinking you're going to have a good time and you're going to enjoy some music, and it's just it's a mindless fun activity, and all of a sudden gunfire rings out, bombs go off, people are literally running over people to get out of the place, and it's like you go from the time of your life to a war zone, and like I was just thinking, like, just that's so insane. And like I say, it doesn't matter if it was a concert full of kids or a concert full of adults or whatever. It's just, it could have also been a sporting event, or it just like the mental and emotional disconnect that, like you said, like they believe for whatever reason they're doing the right thing, but how? How is that possible?
Well, I think people are terrified of the unknown, right? It's very risky to go drive your car down the highway at 70 miles an hour because everyone else is on their cell phones and that sort of thing. But that risk. You understand that risk going into it. Yeah. You don't think about that risk going into a concert. There might be some crazy person that comes in. Yeah. And it's that unknown. There's no logic behind it. Yeah. You can understand.
And I guess it's
and that was because you don't think that way.
Well, that was my larger point, is that I think the randomness of terrorism is much different. So, like, if somebody goes and blows up the World Trade Center, I'm clearly not in favor of it, but I'm like, I get it. For some reason, that's iconic to America, and you're trying to make a giant political point. Would you feel this exact same reaction if they had tried to blow up Buckingham Palace, for example? Like, that's a symbol of England. Yeah. You're making a political point. You're trying to do something. I'm like, well, I'm not really, that doesn't freak me out. None of that freaks me out. If somebody started blowing up grocery stores and banks and places that I go to in my daily life, and it's random and unexpected, that might freak me out a little more. But at some point, there has to be, and this is what's hard about this day and age versus other day and ages, and I think this encapsulates a lot of it, is it's one thing to go to war with Nazi Germany because you know who you're fighting. It's a whole nother thing to say there's just a bunch of randoms out there. They're not super organized. There's all these different little groups that are hard to track. And
there is no uniform.
You're not at war with a country.
Yeah.
It's just crazy individuals. Yeah. And that makes it infinitely harder because you don't want to go, well, okay, I'm going to go to war with all the Islamic nations out there. Why?
Right.
The vast majority of them have done nothing.
Exactly.
It's just a handful of nut jobs.
Just a handful of nut jobs.
So it's very difficult. Yeah. So I think that makes it a much more confusing situation.
I think on that, we're going to pause, and we'll be right back.
Hey, you having a good time? Let me introduce you to a couple of my media brothers. First, www.americathemixtape.com, a cipher on American politics, society, and culture. And where'd I get that mixtape? Of course, www.cornerbodega.us, purveyors of urban culture. Come on, let's get back to the party.
Okay, and so we're back, and before we get too far gone, we are still talking about Memorial Day. So I wanted to kind of quickly ask, is there anybody here at the table that has had family that has served in the military? For first question, before we get to the second question.
I have. I mean, both of my dad was in the Navy. Both of my grandfathers were in the Navy. I had an uncle that was in the Army. I've had an uncle that was in the Marines. He was a paratrooper of some sort. I don't know what they call them in the Marines. But I have a cousin that's in the Air Force. I have a cousin that's in the Army. My son was in it's just a long line of military people.
Yeah. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think at some point everybody has had somebody, particularly if you were old enough to have your grandparents have been part of the World War II generation. Certainly they got drafted, that kind of stuff. And I did and do have a lot of friends who served. And strangely, I went to enlist on the first Iraq War, and then it ended immediately. So
That's all it took. Good job.
But I mean, it's so funny that there just haven't really been these wars that have required that kind of thing. So
And that's not a bad thing.
I mean, when the war lasts 28 days, you're like, oh, that was pretty fast.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I don't know. I always thought it was your duty to do it, especially if your country went to war, but it was over before you could even do it then.
Yeah.
So,
as far as I know, I haven't had anyone die in active service.
Okay.
So.
I have some friends that are or have been, and my grandpa, my dad's side. It's the only family member I can think of.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I have not had a ton of family.
Well, that you know of.
Yeah, that I know of. I've got I guess he'd be my second cousin that he was in the Army, retired, and I know I'm missing one or two cousins, but not like my parents or aunts and uncles, nobody in that generation. And then my grandfather, I don't think he was too young to be in one war and then married by the time it was another one. So I think it was he just kind of, and it kind of the same thing happened with me. It was by the time I even thought I might enlist, it was 9/11, but I was really already too old for my first enlistment, and so I never wound up going. And I have a younger cousin that was going to join the Navy, but he hadn't started boot camp and he's not that many years younger than me. And so we kept saying, I don't know if this is a good idea, and not because you shouldn't serve your country, but just one, you're going to be older than everybody else that's starting boot camp, and two, you really don't want to serve. You're trying to find a way to pay for college, and if that's the reason you're going, that might not be the right reason to go. And then 9/11 broke out, and he was like, oh, shit, I ain't trying to die. And so that was the end of that. And he sent them their uniforms right on back. He said, I hadn't reported anyway, so you got these. And that was the end of that. So
I almost joined the Navy.
Yeah?
They had all my birth certificate and everything, and all but sworn in, and I was just like,
You know, your chief pay officer, Francis.
I often think about how much different my life would be if I would have done that. Because it was before I met my ex and had children, and yeah.
So you said that you did not think you knew of anybody passed in service.
I don't believe so. But no, because all of my, as far back as I can tell, all of my grandparents died old.
Yeah. Anybody else know anybody else that actually passed in service?
No, but I think we'd be remiss not to, talk about a good friend of the show, Lane. I mean, he clearly did a lot of time and took some bullets for it. And everything else.
I'm sure he knows people.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was hoping that I figured that he would be spending time with family today. I was hoping that he might have an opportunity to join us today, but Lane, we are thinking about you from here to you out there in podcast land. Like you said, he went to West Point. He served distinguishedly in the service and was wounded a few times.
He has 3 Purple Hearts.
Yeah, I'm about to say, I think each Purple Heart for each time he was shot in service. So, our show has been touched by the military, and we are proud of all of the military and all of their services, whether they have come home to us or fallen on the battlefield. All right, so before we go, before we get out of here, here is today's sugar honey iced tea. That, of course, is things that I or a member of the group have found that are really cool, aka the shit. And I was thinking about this this week, trying to spot things that I thought were really cool or whatever. But I couldn't get past, kind of on a collectively selfish note, I couldn't get past the coolest thing. And that was having the day off to celebrate and reflect and spending time with people that you care about. That is not something that people everywhere get to do. And so whether or not you've had somebody in the military directly impact your life or not, the fact that we collectively get the day off to remember anybody in our lives that has moved on and that has impacted us in any kind of way, that is the shit. And with that, I'm going to end this podcast in the way I end all podcasts, and that is to good times with good people.